All right, good morning, guys. You guys should just finish up your do now question for the day. Briefly explain what it means to balance a budget and how you plan to personally do it in the future. So, this is something I think we might have touched on a little bit here and there in class, but it's never something we've explicitly covered in more detail. So, we talk about people balancing a budget. Like, what does that mean exactly? Oh, you have a balanced budget, you don't have a balanced budget, and so on and so forth. So, at the end of the day, balancing your budget is simply referring to, hey, here's the money I have, and here's all the stuff that I have to spend it on. And so it's this idea of, okay, I don't want to spend more money than I actually have, but hey, if I spend, if I have some money left over, that's fine. But just making sure that, hey, the amount of money I make is either equal to or more than how much money I have to spend on things, whether it be like, things like rent, electricity, water, going out to eat, whatever it may be. So you guys could answer a couple different ways. The main idea is just kind of that you understood the whole concept behind it. So make sure you have about 4 or 5 sentences. All right, so today, not too extensive, just a couple things to cover, kind of wrapping up, getting towards the end of the unit here. So we've talked about budgets in the past. We've talked about personal budget. We've talked about how the government creates its budget. And so this is just kind of wrapping up a couple terms that maybe we haven't really discussed much in detail about. But just so if you ever come across a conversation or maybe hear something on TV saying, hey, oh, we have a current surplus or the deficit is blah, 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 blah. Just try to make you a little bit more familiar with some of these terms so you can actually look at it and go, oh, wait a minute, I understand that. Or, hey, I understand a little bit about that. And so leave you a little bit better off than you were. All right, so first term we're going to touch on is something called a budget surplus. So we have budget surplus and we have budget deficit. And yes, these are opposites. So a budget surplus, when revenue is larger than expenditures. So 2 terms that you may not be familiar with. We have revenue. Just double touch on what that is. Revenue is simply another word for my income, the money I'm bringing in, like the money I'm making. Okay, how much money am I obtaining? And then we have expenditures, or maybe expenses, if you've heard that word before. So expenses, things I have to spend money on, things that I buy. So whether it be very necessary things like housing or food, or whether it be, hey, I got to spend this much money on designer shoes or whatever it may be. So budget surplus, when my revenue, or the money I'm bringing in, money I'm making, is larger than my expenditures, the amount of money I'm spending. So if it's surplus, that means I make more than I spend, which is a good thing. Then we have budget deficit, which is the exact opposite. This is when my expenditures exceed or are greater than my revenue. So they're kind of flipped. So the first one is making more money than I spend. The second one, spending more money than I actually have. So when we get down to maybe an individual one-on-one basis, what's that look like? Oh, if I'm spending more money than I actually make, that means, hey, I'm usually going into debt. I put money on a credit card. I borrowed money from somebody because it's kind of difficult to spend money I don't have. So what is a lot of people's solution to that? Oh, I don't have enough money to pay this or buy this. Oh, I'll just put it on a credit card. I'll borrow somebody else's money. And so the United States is no different. So when it talks about the U.S. having a surplus or a deficit, if it has a deficit, it has to borrow that money from somewhere, whether it be different countries, whether it be, just different places. Okay, just kind of like our own household budgets. Once again, it's pretty much the exact same thing. It's just on a much larger scale. So just kind of wrapping our minds around that. So this next one, so that's it for the notes section. This next part, it's kind of a slightly lengthier assignment type. So instead of just giving a exit slip at the end, this one's a little bit more in depth. So now that we understand what budget surplus and budget deficit are, now we have to decide, how do we handle either situation? Okay, once we realize, hey, we have a surplus, or hey, we have a deficit, okay, now what do we do about it? If we have a surplus, we think, oh great, we have some extra money left over, what can we do with that? Good things, bad things, somewhere and so forth. Or hey, if we have a deficit, what do we do about that? So what you guys are going to do, for this first question, you are going to answer this for both. You're going to answer this for both for your level, and then also for the national government's level. So how would you handle a budget surplus? Like you as an individual person, how would you handle a deficit? Then how would the government handle a surplus, and how would they handle a deficit? Okay, if we have extra money, what are we going to spend it on? If we don't have enough money, what are we going to do about it? So moving on to question number 2. It's kind of an opinion. How can it be difficult to not always have a surplus or a balanced budget? So kind of just taking everything we talked about into consideration. Why can it be difficult? Even just thinking on an individual level, why is it always not easy to have, okay, a balanced budget, meaning I'm making enough money, or a surplus, meaning I have some left over? Why is that not always easy? So once again, you're answering that question for both your level and then the government's level. Think, okay, I'm making money, I get paychecks every week. Why is it not easy to always have money left over? And then think about it on the government's level. Why do you think it might not be always easy for the government to have extra money left over? So once again, answering it in 2 parts. Make sure you get all written down. I don't really have a sentence requirement for this one. Just make sure you have complete answers. Make sure it's easy to understand and read. If you guys have any questions, please write them down in the comment section below or shoot me an email. If not, I'll see you guys next time.